Welcome to r/Am I the Jerk, where Karen goes to jail and is probably going to be staying there for a while. Am I the jerk for leaving my daughter in the county jail over the weekend? Last night, my daughter was pulled over when she was seen swerving between lanes. They did a field sobriety test, and surprise, surprise, she failed it. This is something we've talked about before because I've smelt it in her breath on other occasions after she had driven home. She was arrested and is in the county jail now. I was asleep when she called, but I listened to her message this morning. She was crying and begging me to come bail her out. She's a careless driver who has totaled 2 cars in the past, which her biological dad immediately replaced with even better cars. But now her biological dad is gone, heart attack, and I don't want to enable her dangerous driving problem to continue. I'm just overwhelmed right now. She's had accidents before, but has never had to deal with any real consequences. She's currently 22 and not working or going to school. I don't know, maybe this would be good for her, like a wake-up call. Am I the jerk for thinking about letting her spend a weekend in jail? Not the jerk. She's an adult. She made a choice that could have resulted in serious injury to an innocent person, and further, her history indicates previous lessons have not been learned. Leaving her there to spend the weekend thinking seems quite reasonable. You're the jerk. At the end of the day, that's still your daughter. You decided to bring her into the world, so what gives you the right to leave her stranded now that she needs you the most? My parents tried this tough love crap on me, and that's part of why I went no contact with them. So don't be surprised when she decides to go no contact with you. Reddit, man, Reddit. Maybe instead of complaining about your daughter here on Reddit, you should be looking into getting her therapy and finding out what's leading to this type of behavior. Am I the jerk for telling my husband either he comes home or I'm done? I've been with my husband for 9 years now. I just gave birth to our son 5 months ago after years of infertility. We underwent 3 rounds of IVF before we had a pregnancy that stuck. We lost 4. This was such a big turning point in our marriage. We got unbelievably closer, despite all of the grief, and for the first 3.5 months of our son's life, my husband was easily the most attentive and helpful man that I've ever had in my life. Life was happy. Well, his mom all of a sudden came back into his life when our son was 3.5 months old. She moved back to our state. She moved to Canada without him when he was 13 and has barely seen him or his siblings for 17 years. There have been multiple occasions where her presence has made me incredibly uncomfortable. Like she has come here a good 5 to 6 times since our son was 3.5 months old, never held the baby either. When my husband says, "Look, it's Grammy," his mom will raise her eyebrow and say, "Hi," before walking away. 99% of the time that she comes here, she asks my husband to go outside with her, away from me and the baby, and she started to ask my husband a lot to go to her place, and needless to say, me and the baby are never invited. She says that she's just trying to catch up with him and make up for lost time, but I'm honestly just so done with it. Today was his only day off this week. The baby has a spiked fever and is super cranky. I had to call out of work for the past 3 days due to this. I work from home. The house is an absolute mess. I haven't showered in 4 days. I can't put the baby down without him screaming. I need help. Well, around 10 a.m., his mom calls and says she needs him because she has a surgery and needs a ride to and from. So he leaves. There was no prior notice. Well, he called me about an hour ago and told me that her boyfriend is there too. So I asked him why is he still there when she clearly has a ride and a support system. He says that she just asked him to be there and he wanted to be there for her. Well, he just called me again 10 minutes ago and tells me that she's in recovery and asked him not to leave. I told him that I really needed his help and that ever since his mother has popped back up, he's been MIA and I feel like I'm doing everything alone now. He told me that he's sorry I feel that way and that he wants to be home with us, but his mother needs him. I guess something inside me just broke when he said that because I'm telling him I need him and his mom needing him is more important. So I told him if he didn't come back home, I was done. I would file for divorce. I'm not playing second to a mother who ditched her kids 17 years ago and has seen them all of twice since then. Me needing his help is more important than his mother wanting him there when she already has support with her. He says, "Are you serious?" And I just hang up. I hardly see this man anymore because of this woman, and I don't want to live a life like this anymore, even though it's only been a month and a half since this started happening. Am I the jerk? The hospital is only 15 minutes away from us, so if he's not back in 30 minutes, I'm packing my stuff. ETA. I own a property that I rent out for Airbnb. That's where I'll be going. No, I don't have a support system. I grew up in foster care. My biological mother passed during giving birth, and my dad didn't want me. I was never adopted out. My best friend moved 2 years ago. It's just me and used to be my husband. Edit. On the way to the Airbnb now. The last phone call I received was him telling me his mother would be discharged within the hour and he would be home after dropping her off. Her boyfriend, who lives with her, is still at the hospital. He could drive her, but mommy wants her precious son to. So I'm leaving. Not the jerk. Why is she back? Is she getting older and needs someone to take care of her? Does she need a kidney? No one pops back into another person's life like this. There must be a reason. Your spouse is trying to play perfect son with his mother who left him, and in the process, he's leaving his own kid. The irony. What do his siblings say? Are they letting her back in? Am I the jerk for not forgiving my dad for what he said? My dad, who's 45, is really into cars. His dad, my grandpa, is also into cars. My grandpa used to work in a mechanic shop, and my dad learned to work on cars with him. They can talk for hours about different car models and engines and tell stories about cars that they've worked on. I, 17, male, am not really into them. My dad tried to get me into fixing up cars with him, but it just doesn't click with me. I know basic stuff like how to change a tire or oil, or how to jumpstart a battery because he taught me and I'm glad for that. But talking about cars and working on them for fun, I'm just not into that. I always thought my dad was okay with me not being a car guy. 5 months ago, we got these new neighbors that moved next door. It's a married couple and their nephew, Mason, who's 16, who lives with them. Mason and I go to school together. At first, I helped show him around school until he got comfortable and made his own friends. He and I still talk, but we don't hang out. Mason is like my dad and my grandpa. He's obsessed with talking about cars and has a whole list of cars he wants to drive and own one day. He would come over with his aunt and uncle, and a lot of times Mason and his uncle would hang out with my dad in the garage. Sometimes I'd be there too, but usually it's just them. My dad usually works on his project car in the garage every other weekend for a couple of hours. For Father's Day this year, he said he wanted to be able to work on his car all day uninterrupted, which my mom agreed to. Whenever he works on his car, he leaves the garage door open. Mason has been coming by when my dad works on it for the past couple months, and he talks to my dad, and sometimes he helps him out with smaller stuff related to the car. I don't really care. My dad does other things with me. But on Sunday, I went to go ask him something when he was in the garage with Mason. The door from the house in the garage was open, and him and Mason were talking. I was waiting by the door for a chance to speak because I didn't want to interrupt their conversation. My dad was praising Mason for whatever he did. Mason said he had done that with his dad, and my dad told Mason his dad would be proud of him. Then he said Mason is the kind of son that he wanted to have. I don't know why, but that really hurt to hear. I never thought that me not being into cars was an issue for my dad. I knew he still loved me, but I guess it's not enough. I didn't say anything and just went back to my room. He doesn't know that I heard him say that. I've been ignoring him since then. I still answer him when he asks me questions or tells me to do something, but I just don't want to talk to him just because anymore. Him and my mom, who's 43, have asked me if something is wrong, but I lie and say no. I thought they would just let it go, but a few days ago I messed up and told my older sister, who's 19, what happened because she kept asking me, and now she's not talking to my dad either, and she's being a lot meaner to him about it. But I made her promise not to tell anyone the reason, so she's keeping her word. It's really tense in our house right now. My parents keep asking us why we're mad at our dad, but neither of us are answering, and I don't know. I feel like maybe I should just let it go and go back to the way things were. I really don't want to though when my dad is disappointed in who I am. Am I the jerk if I don't forgive my dad? Why not tell him this? Dad, I get that you're disappointed that I'm not into cars like you and Grandpa. It's just not my thing. But I do appreciate how you taught me the basics. But when I went to the garage to see you on Father's Day, I heard you tell Mason that he was the kind of son you wanted and wished you had. Do you have any idea how hurtful that is? On Father's Day, I got to hear my dad tell someone else that they were the type of kid he wanted. So yeah, I'm hurt. You said it so casually and on Father's Day. Not the jerk. It also struck me that Dad specifically asked to be left alone to work on his car uninterrupted on Father's Day, but happily lets Mason interrupt him on Father's Day and then drops the little gem about wanting a son like Mason. What an awful situation. Update. My dad did ask to be left alone to work on his car, but it's not because he didn't want to spend Father's Day with us. We had a special breakfast for him and we gave him his gifts in the morning. The incident happened in the late afternoon. My mom usually wants to be left alone to work on her art projects or read one of her books on Mother's Day too. It's not that they don't want to spend the day with us, they just like to be able to focus on their hobbies without having to worry about household or family duties for a few hours. It's normal in my family for my mom and dad to give each other breaks or a day off sometimes. Another thing is, my dad didn't invite Mason to work on his car with him. He did tell Mason a while back that if the garage door is open, then Mason is free to walk in and chat. That's what Mason usually does. My dad doesn't talk to him outside of when Mason comes over by himself or with his aunt and uncle. I don't think my dad even has Mason's number. They're not really close. They just both like cars. I know most people told me to tell my mom or my dad, or both, what I heard. I was kind of hoping the tension would just go away and be forgotten, which I know is dumb and not realistic, but I really didn't want to have that awkward conversation, so I just kept quiet. Things got really bad today. My sister and I were still mostly ignoring our dad. My mom would keep asking us a bunch of questions and guessing reasons why we were mad. I thought she gave up, but earlier today, she said we were going to have a family game night tonight, which we never really do. I really didn't feel like doing that, but I was just going to sit there and deal with it. But my sister told my mom we won't be joining if dad is there. My mom asked why, but my sister just said he knows what he did. So my mom went to talk to our dad, and like an hour later, she made us all sit down in the living room to talk. My dad was mad now. He told us that we need to say whatever is on our minds because now our mom is asking if we caught him cheating on her or something. She was running out of theories for why we were mad. To be fair, she guessed it right on the second day, asking if he had said something to make me mad, but I lied and said no at the time. She said she knows it has something to do with me because I was mad at him first. So I finally told her what I overheard my dad say. My mom was shocked, and my dad immediately denied it, which really sucked. Because if he thought it and said it out loud, he could at least have the courage to admit it, but he didn't. He kept saying that he didn't say that, but I told him I know what I heard. He tried to lie and say that what he said was that Mason's dad would be proud of him. That's true, and that if Mason was his son, he'd be proud of the kind of person he was. That's a lie. He didn't say that. My sister got mad and told him to stop gaslighting me. Then they argued for a couple of minutes until my mom stopped them. My mom asked me if I was sure of what I had heard, and I said yes. I told her exactly what he said to Mason. Your dad would be proud of you. I know I would be. You're exactly the kind of son I wanted to have. I know that because I kept hearing my dad's voice saying it over and over in my head. I've been hearing it whenever I look at him since that day. And my mom turned to my dad and started yelling at him for saying that. So my dad finally admitted it, but said that I misunderstood him. He says he was just trying to make Mason feel better because Mason was sad and kept talking about his dad that had passed because it was on Father's Day. My dad wasn't trying to put me down or say I was a disappointment to him. He said he was sorry and he tried to hug me, but I was honestly mad that he denied it at first, so I didn't let him. My mom didn't accept his reasoning either. She said that Mason, his aunt and uncle aren't invited anymore and that we're just going to be neighbors from now on and that's it. I feel bad because they didn't do anything wrong, but my mom kept going and telling my dad that he needs to stop spending so much time on his stupid car and start paying more attention to his family. He really doesn't spend a lot of time on it, maybe like 2 days out of the month for 3 to 4 hours. I think she was just really mad at him, which is what I was worried about. So my dad shouted that he'll just get rid of the car then, since everybody suddenly has a problem with his hobby. He left to my uncle's house, his brother, after that, and I don't think he's coming back tonight. I feel really bad. I should have just let it go. I really wanted to, but I couldn't. If he hadn't tried to lie and just said sorry, maybe I would have accepted his apology and this would be done. I'm not really even mad anymore. I just feel like a failure. I wish I could have just been more into cars, then this whole thing would have never happened. Sorry it's not a happy update, but a lot of people were asking for one. I hope he comes back soon. OP, if you're reading this, I'm sorry your dad is a complete jerk. And tell your mom this really isn't about the car or the amount of time your dad spends on the car. It's about what your dad really thinks of you. His reaction was to deny, lie, manipulate, and minimize, then pout and run away instead of dealing with what he said, not just on Father's Day, but during and after the family meeting. I'm sorry you have to go through this. Your dad doesn't deserve forgiveness. Am I the jerk for refusing to adopt another kid and possibly divorcing my husband over it? I, 33 female, met my husband during university. A mutual friend of ours set us up and we hit it off instantly. My husband made it immediately clear that he wanted to foster and adopt kids in the future and that if I wasn't okay with it, I would be gone. For context, my husband was adopted when he was 7 and wanted to do the same for others. I also made it clear that I wanted biological kids as well, which he was okay with. We ended up married after 2 years of dating and both completed our degrees. We currently have 2 daughters, Rosie, who's 5, biological, and Julia, 7, who's adopted. We started fostering when my biological daughter was a newborn and adopted Julia around a year ago. Since then, we stopped fostering and chose to focus on our family. However, I've noticed my husband clearly favors Julia over Rosie. He takes her out for bonding time, but either leaves my daughter or drops her off somewhere else. He doesn't tuck Rosie in at night anymore. He doesn't make an effort to go to her events, and he practically ignores her when she's at home, unless it's to do something for him like chores. I've brought this up constantly to him, and I'm at my breaking point. Rosie and Julia are both smart, beautiful, joyous girls. Rosie is both in ballet and gymnastics, highly advanced for her grade level, but has a hard time making friends. Julia has started cheerleading, makes lots of friends, but she does struggle a bit in school, which my husband uses as an excuse to not pay attention to Rosie. I'm currently 3 months pregnant with our third, and my husband's reaction to finding out was, "When can we start fostering again?" 2 weeks ago, my daughter asked me, "Why doesn't Daddy love me anymore?" And that was when I knew the problem wouldn't be fixed unless I made a drastic move. I contacted a divorce lawyer, and he said nearly everything would be in my favor. We have a prenuptial agreement that allows us to keep nearly everything separate. The house is in my name. We have 2 separate bank accounts and 1 joint account, which would be split. I would not be required to pay alimony and keep one of our cars. My husband would be getting most, if not all, of our retirement account. Considering I make a substantial amount more than my husband, $250K a year, while he makes around $55K a year, I would be able to continue our lifestyle while he wouldn't. It also would likely prevent him from adopting more kids in the future, which I don't want to do to him. The situation is ideal for me, besides me paying child support, assuming my husband would even be able to support our kids with 50-50 custody. I have no intention of keeping our daughters from him. After speaking with my lawyer, I gave my husband an ultimatum. Treat both of our kids as equal, or I would be filing for divorce. He was enraged after that, screaming at me about how I'm a jerk for trying to ruin his life goals and saying how I don't understand what it's like for kids who experience the foster care system, that our daughter, Rosie, was selfish and she needs to understand why Julia needed more attention than her. My girls ended up waking up from the noise and came downstairs crying. At this point, I was both trying to calm my husband down and comfort my girls all at once. Finally, my husband stopped yelling and I could put them back to bed. But I have to admit, I started to resent Julia. I know very well it's not her fault, and I don't let that affect how I treat them, but I sometimes find myself laying awake at night wondering how it would be if we just didn't have her. I always imagine myself with a toddler and our last one on the way. My husband loving all of us, being so kind the way he used to be. Again, I don't blame Julia whatsoever, and I'm very ashamed of these thoughts. However, I'm afraid if something happens again, I'll snap, and I don't want to shout at anyone. I have both of the girls in therapy already. Julia needs it because of her past, and we had Rosie go when we started fostering. Any advice is appreciated, as well as criticism. I'm also willing to answer any questions. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. He clearly has issues and isn't a good father. I'd leave him now if I were you and never look back. Staying with a man like this will be a major regret later in life. Am I the jerk if I don't help a relative because they wasted their money buying a house for $2.8 million? I, 40 male, have a blended family and a cousin who's 34 on my step-parents' side who used to be close to me. However, due to him moving abroad and conflicts over an inheritance, we no longer talk these days. Recently, I've been receiving calls from various local and overseas relatives asking for financial help for my cousin. He has defaulted on his house payments and is more than 6 months behind on mortgage and loan repayments because his wife, native Chinese, convinced him to buy a house in Shanghai. He had a good job in what should have been a stable company, but lockdown hit them hard and he has never recovered. Apparently, it seems he got laid off 8 months ago. When we were still talking, he told me he was going to buy this ridiculously expensive house, 2.8 million RMB, about 400,000 US dollars, that was basically a concrete box. I told him he was insane and would regret it for many reasons, but particularly because he would never actually own the place due to Chinese laws. Now, 4 years later, he still owes nearly 2 million RMB on his mortgage since his payments have only been covering the interest, and nearly an additional 1 million RMB in loans for the decorations used to make that concrete box a place that you could live in. I'm a teacher in the US, and I don't earn enough money to own my own house, so how am I supposed to give someone else money to pay off theirs when I warned them that this would come back and get them? In the Chinese real estate market, you are always just one bad day or one con man away from losing 3 generations of savings. This house was so expensive for him that it took up 70% of his monthly income just to pay the interest on the mortgage. Now I'm being harassed for his stupidity to help him out of this hole because I let on that I had a decent savings account. It's not house money, but I want to buy a new car, something nice for once, and not just new to me. Even my biological family is giving me grief about this, but I don't want to help. Would I be the jerk if I don't help them? Don't help them. Block them. You couldn't help even if you wanted to. Helping or not helping isn't even a question for you. Any money you may be able to scrape together to send them will be like it's going into a black hole. Not the jerk. Am I the jerk for telling my husband he needs to quit his dream job? So I, 32 female, and my husband, 29 male, live in an area with an extremely high cost of living. I work a job that pays decently well, which is kind of necessary to live where we do. My husband worked a job for years that paid less than mine did, but was okay overall, though he absolutely hated working there. Around October of last year, my husband managed to get a job in his dream career field. We had been working at it for years, and he was really excited about finally getting there. However, it's come with this. The big issue is the pay in his field is abysmal. He works as a freelancer, which is standard in his industry, so his job has zero benefits, and it's a pretty significant pay cut from his old job. We don't have combined finances, and after he took the new job, we had to rearrange how we pay for things to account for his lower income. Previously, he had covered a slightly larger percentage of the expenses due to me having student loans to pay off while he didn't. As it is now, I have to be the breadwinner since his income was basically halved, paying for a larger portion of the expenses. I sat him down recently, and I told him I felt he needed to quit his job and find a better paying field because it just wasn't feasible. He got upset, since, like I said, this is something he's dreamed of for years and worked really hard to get, which I understand, but I just feel this isn't fair to me. We've had to cut back on a lot of things, and there's not really any sign of a pay increase at this point. I feel like I'm carrying him. He offered to get a part-time job on the side, but I know anything he could get that would be feasible for him while keeping his current job wouldn't provide much. He suggested we move somewhere less expensive, to which I said absolutely not, since we'd have to go quite a ways to find something in that range, and it would mean ridiculously long commutes to my work and being further away from my family. He offered to have his parents help, which I don't want because it's not a long-term solution. He's extremely upset, and I understand it because I know he worked hard to get here. If he quit now, it would basically end his career, and it would be extremely hard for him to get another shot at this job. It's not like we're struggling, which is true. We can pay rent and put food on the table, but I hate feeling like this. I work long days at a rather difficult job while he works from home doing something he did before as a hobby and only makes half as much money now. My point is that it's not like he has to stop doing what he does altogether, since, as I mentioned, he did it as a hobby beforehand. But he's upset because he said this is the only thing he's ever wanted to do career-wise, and giving it up now would mean he'll likely never be able to make it work. Am I the jerk? I understand this is important to him, but I'm starting to resent him because I feel like the burden of our finances are being placed on me, and we've had to cut back on a lot of things. You're the jerk. It would be one thing if his pay cut had made it so you were truly financially struggling, but from what you said, you're not. Isn't it more important for your husband to be happy and fulfilled by his work than to have some extra luxuries? Also, it sounds like he's trying to find compromises and you're not. Am I wrong for telling my fiance, I guess our wedding isn't as important to me as you thought it was? I'm 29 male. My fiance is 31 female. We're due to get married in the 15th of July, or at least we were. For a little backstory, I dated my first girlfriend, whom I'll call Cassie, back when we were 16, and we dated for about 3 years. Since we were high schoolers, we ended up meeting each other's families pretty quickly. Cassie had a little brother that I'll call Kyle, who was 10 years old that I unexpectedly became really close to. The kid really looked up to me. He said I was like his big brother. Me and Kyle spent a lot of time playing video games, and he would sometimes ask me to help him with his homework. But of course, this didn't last forever. Me and Cassie broke up, and we began to drift away from each other's families. And eventually, I even moved out of that town entirely, making it impossible for us to see each other again. Fast forward to just a couple of days ago. I was contacted by Cassie telling me something heartbreaking. Kyle had recently passed in an accident. I was heartbroken. I know we hadn't seen each other in about a decade, but when I think of him, I think of the same kid I knew back then. Cassie asked me to fly out for the funeral. She said Kyle would have wanted me there. I agreed without hesitation and told her I'd definitely be there. Before booking a plane ticket, however, I decided it was important to tell my fiance first. I approached her and told her about the funeral, who it was for, and who invited me. She told me I can't go. I asked why, and she said that she didn't want me going because my ex would be there, because she thought Cassie might try something with me. I told her I'm pretty sure she'd be too upset over her brother to try and hook up with me. She told me that she has no way of knowing that since she's never met her before. I told her she could come with me. If I asked Cassie to invite my fiance so we could go together, I doubt she'd refuse. But my fiance told me it was creepy to go to the funeral of a stranger. So I just told her I don't care if she goes with me or not. I'll go by myself. I'm definitely going though. She told me I was jeopardizing our wedding by choosing to go. So I snapped at her and told her that clearly our wedding isn't as important to me as she thinks it is, and I stormed off. I ended up booking that plane ticket and leaving that evening. The funeral just ended a little while ago. Me and Cassie only spoke for about 5 minutes before we parted ways. I'll be flying back home tomorrow. When I go back, I'm fully expecting to no longer have a fiance, so I guess we'll see what happens. Am I in the wrong? Always remember, breaking up even 5 minutes before the wedding is way cheaper, easier, less emotionally damaging than divorcing even 5 minutes after the wedding. You aren't wrong. That was an absurd demand. You're the jerk. When you decide to marry someone, they come first. You showed her that you care more about your past girlfriend, her brother, and their problems than you do about your fiance. Marriage is meant to be 100% dedication to your partner. You showed her that is not the case for you. This is why divorce is so common now, and your marriage wouldn't last anyways. If you're not willing to commit 100% to your partner and put their feelings above all else, don't get married. Am I the jerk for threatening to kick out my stepdaughter for stealing from my daughter? 4 years ago, my wife passed, leaving me, 42 male, and my daughters, who are 19 and 17, behind. 1.5 years ago, I met Vicky, who's 47, and we quickly fell in love. Vicky has a daughter, Heather, who's 24, and together they came to live with us. Vicky and I did not get married, however, so Heather isn't technically my stepdaughter. Almost from the beginning, Heather wasn't very nice towards me, to say the least. I tried to get to know her and at least establish a cordial relationship, but nothing ever worked. She was very disrespectful and hateful to me, but also to her mother. Heather also picked verbal fights with my daughters, but I squashed that soon after it started. Heather was the instigator, and I told her that if she had a problem, she should direct it at me instead of at my daughters. It seemed to work. Last week was Casey's, my eldest daughter's, 19th birthday. I gave her a spa package treatment for 2 people, total $500, in the form of a gift card, and I told her she could pick another person to go with. She chose her younger sister, who was happy to go with her. They would pick a date and make the reservation. Casey wanted to make the reservation 2 days ago, but couldn't find the gift card. After hours of searching, we still couldn't find it. When Heather came home, we asked her if she had seen it, and she told us she hadn't. After another hour, Vicky found the gift card in Heather's room, against Heather's protests. After a while, Heather admitted she took the card from Casey's room and went to the spa 2 days ago with her girlfriend. I was super upset, and I told her that if she didn't pay Casey $500, I would kick her out. Since Heather doesn't have a job and has dropped out of college, she says she can't pay it. She's been living at my house rent-free with everything paid for. I told her if she can't pay for it, she should go live with her deadbeat father instead. She called me every name in the book and locked herself in her room. Vicky says it was a jerk move since she has nowhere else to go and her father won't pay for her to live with him. Answers to a few commonly asked questions. Has Heather done things like this before? Heather has never stolen before. This is new and I didn't see it coming. She has indicated that she doesn't like my daughters. I left this out, but my youngest daughter once cooked for the family, taking everyone's diet wishes into account as much as possible. Heather didn't even touch the food and went to Burger King instead. When my youngest told her that she could at least try it, Heather called her a jerk. My dude, is your relationship with Vicky more important than your daughters? Of course my daughters are more important. I guess I was just desensitized to it with regard to this particular situation. Because neither Vicky nor Heather can cook. I always cook after work. And Heather never touched the food I make either. What does Heather eat? Does she use your money to buy food? Yes, Heather gets spending money every week for food, gas, and other things. So is Vicky going to pay the $500 her daughter stole? Vicky has been a stay-at-home mom since her daughter was born. Vicky doesn't have a job. Her ex was ordered to pay alimony and child support, but he's never paid. And yes, I am looking at Vicky in a new light. This is concerning. What does Vicky suggest the punishment be? Vicky suggests a harsh talking to. I don't think that would help much. She doesn't even listen to her mother that often. Update. Considering it's been a rough week and only now are things calming down, I thought I'd write an update. I sat down with my daughters and had a long conversation about Heather, my relationship with Vicky, and how I'd let it go up to this point. In short, my daughters have for a long time hated Heather. They didn't have many problems with Vicky, only regarding how Vicky always lets Heather easy off the hook. I read many comments and I started doubting my relationship with Vicky. I knew it wasn't perfect, but thought we loved each other. My daughters are of the opinion that Vicky never loved me, but that I also never really loved Vicky. Especially, Casey thought it was more companionship that we shared and that I was lonely. My daughter hit the nail on the head, and she was right. I didn't want to spoil my daughter's day to the spa and paid for it so that they could still go. They went a few days ago and had a blast. Regarding Heather, I essentially kicked her out. Vicky threatened to leave if I kicked Heather out, and I told Vicky that she was also free to go. After that, she quickly backpedaled and told me that she didn't want to go. Heather made a fuss, but I let her take her stuff and she moved out within 2 days. She's temporarily staying at a girlfriend of hers. I told Vicky that if Heather didn't pay the $500 back, we were going to call the police and report her. Vicky was horrified and called her parents. I was surprised by this because Vicky told me she had a bad relationship with her parents. As far as I know, her parents gave her the $500 and she gave it to me. After this, I was about to have a difficult conversation with Vicky and wanted to tell her that we are over, but she beat me to it. She told me that I treated Heather horribly because I was threatening to call the police, and she couldn't live with that. I was relieved, and it probably showed, prompting Vicky to call me out, asking if I was going to try to make it up to her and convince her to stay. I told her no. After this, and a lot of screaming on Vicky's part, she also left. She's staying with a married couple that are close friends with her. It took a bit more time and energy to move her stuff to her friend's house. While I was there helping her move stuff, I was essentially ignored, so I have no idea what Vicky told them. Today's the first day of peace and quiet in my house, and I already noticed that my daughters are a lot happier. That's all that matters to me. So, if Vicky hasn't worked for 24 years, and the ex hasn't paid alimony or child support, and Vicky has a poor relationship with her parents, how did she pay rent, car, food, etc. before she met OP? I think the Heather apple didn't fall far from the Vicky tree, and there's a lot of lying going on. Good thing they weren't married. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.